Welcome to tutorial demo number 6. This time I wanted to go over some of the code that you would receive in this package. I think we've pretty much covered the player inventory script as well as the lootable object script. However, we will go in here and take a quick look. So I use Visual Studio. Just double click it to open it. You can use whatever editor you like. You will notice first of all that you can there's a lot of regions in here, so you're able to go through and find the different things. We have the variables, internal helpers, here's your item command handlers, and so we'll just start with some of the variables, and I have those grouped into the internal private use and all and such. Starting with usually the most important ones towards the top. But you can see that these are fairly well named to represent what they to indicate what they represent, and as you go through the different ones you'll be able to find them. So you could change them here if you like, and you can change them in the editor as well. So if we go ahead and we'll just turn off all the outlining here, and you see I've declared things serializable and non-serializable and all such. I've grouped the types together, so there's your prompts, your different recs, the different setups and such. If you look at your methods here, you'll see that they're all pretty well named the same thing. So if they're dealing with an inventory item, or if they're create, here we do have a build, but that's because it's building which buttons it should be showing. Attach an inventory item command delegate. So these are your event handlers that currently are supported. And of course, if you follow these through the code, you'll be able to implement as many as you like on any of the events that you would like. Another thing I'd like to mention is the log message. So this is kind of nice. If you go into the inventory system settings, you can turn off the debug messages, and then whatever you're currently working on, you'll just use debug.log as you normally would, and you'll be able to see that specific message as you're working on it. Of course, once you've finished up your code and you're moving on, you'll want to switch it to a log message. Now, log message here takes two parameters. One of them has a default, and so basically the first is the message, and I typically try and use whatever is the indication to the player or the developer, and then I try and put which function it was that had actually called this and thrown this exception. Now if this is inside of an exception block, and even in cases where it's not inside of an exception block, you can pass an exception as the second argument. Exceptions will be on a separate switch, which I'll show you, so you can turn these off for game release if you'd like, or you can turn them on. That's up to you. And so we'll take a closer look at that in a minute. So let's go look at that log message. So it takes the message and an exception. So if it's just information, you just pass it a string for the message. And it takes an exception. So if the exception isn't null, then it's going to go ahead and log it. And so if it's just a regular message and you have the messages turned on, then we'll go ahead and log that. So it's pretty much common functionality, no big surprise. Here's your different event handlers. So that's a brief look at the player inventory, the main script there. And let's go back to Unity here. We had the lootable object script. There's not a lot here. This is mostly just the attributes of an inventory item. These could also be scaled out to implement any type of commands or states or whatever that you would like. Simply follow one of these through the code and you'll be able to see how they're done. So if we go back out to Unity, let's look at some of these core scripts here. Most of these you're not going to need to change. Two in specific you might. So we'll get to those in a second. The drag item, this is pretty much just for dragging items around. So when you're dragging inside of the inventory window, this script would provide that functionality. Nothing new here, pretty standard. And so if we go back, we have the inventory item. And this is the class representation of an actual inventory item. So this will tell us what slot it's in, what bag it's in. Currently for the basic version that's not used. but in the extended version it is. So then we have some other things, the name and the texture that goes with it, some helper functions. And then again, you'll see your different attributes that you can attach to it, different items. And if we go back to Unity, we have the inventory manager, and this is going to contain most of your behavior or most of your actions inside of there. So anything that's generic, such as adding a game object to a player inventory. So we'd pass in the game object and the inventory that you want to add that game object to. You can see that it's all fairly well documented in different places, especially when different things are happening between the different log messages and also in just the code documentation. Fairly well written code, I believe. I try and check for all the different errors and different things that I possibly can. So this has got different functions in it: add game objects, destroy inventory items. If you wanted to get all available player inventory slots, this would give you that information back. You can get a specific item from a token. So a token is the GUI representation of an inventory item. And typically the way to think of it is that the token is what an action is applied to. So I don't actually split an item. I split a token that represents a stack of items. So here we've got the get inventory item in a slot index. So if you want a specific slots item, you could do that. And we got all these different things. So you get the next empty player inventory slot. You can save the player inventory, split different things in slot indexes through code and such. So that's what the inventory manager is in charge of. And if we head back to Unity, we're down to the inventory slot. This is just simply the inventory slot, so just the index and the size and shape of it. Nothing too complicated there. Inventory system. Now this is one of the files that you can edit manually if you like. This is where you would enable your debug message as well as your exception messages. Here's where you can set your key code for toggling the player inventory open and close. In the advanced version, you're able to pick up items with an F key for an action, so that's not currently used. And we have the player inventory save file. This can be edited if you'd like to change the place that is saved. Encrypt the player inventory file. This is not implemented for the basic version, so in the advanced version you'll be able to use that. And then we got a couple of functions, 5 I believe. We have a clone inventory item. So pretty much as it says, it's just going to make an exact copy of an inventory item. And then we have these get upper positions, or get these position recs, and this just lets you get the inventory's upper, lower, lefts, and right positions. So that's it for the inventory system. If we head back to Unity, then we can go on to the inventory token. And so as I said, the inventory token is a representation of an inventory item. That item is attached to the item information struct. So here we got some other different things about that token inside of the GUI window, and then what's used in there. So you can check if it's a valid token and whatnot. Not too important, you won't be changing much in here. If you head back to Unity, we have item commands. This is another file that you would actually want to change. These are where the custom event or item commands are handled. So when you go to implement and equip item, this is where you would actually implement your code to equip that item. So you can see that the game object that they're trying to equip is being passed into it from the player inventory. So this is the game object that they're trying to equip. If you need something from the player inventory, you can uncomment this line, and that gives you an example of how you can access the player inventory so that you can provide any functionality in it. The basic idea of equipping an item is going to be different for each person. You'll probably want to make a generic function or already have one implemented, who knows. But you're going to get the transform attached to the parent of the specific bone that you want. And so really this is the reason I can't do that for you. Once you've gone ahead and set up the position and all of such, then you'd want to go ahead and destroy that item from the inventory slot. So if you uncommented that line there, it would go ahead and destroy that item once you have equipped it. Here's your use item handler. You have your consume item, your open item, and then once again just your generic log message so that you can log messages throughout here. So that's it for item commands. There won't be a lot of changes to that to avoid conflict, so that's a good place to make your changes if you need. If we head back to Unity, we got some selectable object. Now this is another one that you might dabble with. This is pretty much what makes objects out in the game world receive your mouse over event to display the window. And so there's different settings that you can set either through the editor or through the file, such as the looting distance, how close do they need to be in order to loot an item, and then just a state Boolean flag to indicate whether we're looting an object currently, Boolean whether we want to show the information window or not, the different text, and then of course your offsets for the window recs. We got the player inventory so that you can interact with it once it's inside of the loot range. Really there's not a lot here you'll probably need to mess with. You may actually end up having to remove some of this code if you've already got your own mouse handling system or selection system, but that's going to depend on your game. So we got a function here. It's just going to set up a GUI skin for a default, and then when the GUI is loaded for this selectable object, it's going to go ahead and check and see whether you've double clicked it in order to load it. And so this is where the functionality for the F key could also go if you cared to implement it yourself. When we display the window, we're simply adding a 10 pixel offset just to keep it from covering up the mouse, and then we display that window. So that's the selectable object, which is what lootable object inherits from. So here we have the selection manager class, and the selection manager is pretty much the same thing. It's just one step above. It's going to help with keeping track of which of the items is currently being selected. If we go look at the last one, which is the serializer, this is just the basic serializer. It's going to convert strings to byte arrays and such. This is what saves it out your XML, saves out your player inventory to an XML file. This is also where in the advanced version the encryption would occur. As you can see, we just got different functions for creating and loading XML, serializing and deserializing objects to strings and bytes arrays. So that's pretty much a brief overview of the different codes. Later on in the different tutorials, we'll be going through the code a little bit more in detail and maybe even showing some of the changes that can be made. Hope you enjoyed these tutorials, and I hope you enjoy the IGIS player inventory system, and I thank you.